Yo, SWAC talk. Light on the mic, it's a play. See Wells the guy taking us state to state. Catch us Wednesday, Sunday, stats on the buffet. From Grand Baron to the court, we got the say. Football spirals, hoop dreams in the chat. Chopping it up, deep dives on every stat. Texas to Florida, repping border to border. Arkansas to Bama, the vibe getting warmer. SWAC talk, keep the knowledge on deck. See Wells spinning, wisdom gotta show respect. Facts flying higher than a wide receiver's check. From football to hoops, what y'all expect? Guests roll through, dropping stories untold. Legends from the SWAC, spitting straight gold. Locker room vibe, secrets unfold. CW heavy like a championship hold. The South's got a rhythm, a culture to match. Each stat, each fact, another door latch. SWAC talk connects like a perfect pass catch. From Alabama skies to Florida's grass patch. SWAC talk, keep the energy alive. Wednesday to Sunday, where the legends thrive. Facts and stats sharper than a coach's knife. Ballin' on the mic, that's how we survive.
All right, everybody, what's going on, man? How y'all doing? Welcome to today's edition of SWAC Talk, the show we cover the SWAC inside and out. Of course, I am your tour guide around the SWAC. C. Wells coming at you. And today we're going to take a look at the history books and the series. We're going to keep tabs on the season series between all the SWAC teams for this upcoming season. We got a few matchups that haven't been played in a long time, and some that haven't been played really at all. So we're gonna take a look at that and see, who got series leads, who got win streaks, who got this, who got that, and we're gonna have a good time with it, man. But before we do that, man, first off, happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there. Happy Mother's Day to everybody in my family, Judy Wells, Jessica Wells, Yolanda Moore. Happy Heavenly Mother's Day to Patricia Sin and my sister Sharon Johnson. And anybody else out there, man, celebrating, man, y'all treat y'all mothers and wives, sisters and baby mamas, treat them all well today, and make sure they get you back on Father's Day. So keep it like that. Hit those socials: Facebook at SWAC Talk, Instagram SWAC Talk, Twitter SWAC Talk 76. Also, don't forget to like the video, comment, and share your thoughts. 200th episode of SWAC Smoke coming at you live on Thursday, man. We're gonna have us a good time. We're gonna do some reminiscing, some having fun. We're gonna have, we're gonna put the link in. You can join the stream and get your thoughts off as well. So y'all keep it locked here. Whatever else coming this week, I ain't quite sure. So keep it locked on those socials to figure out, to find out what's what. And so let's go ahead and jump into this video, man. We're gonna talk about these season series, and as per usual, we'll start with the Bulldogs of Alabama A&M. What we're gonna do is I'm gonna look at every matchup between SWAC teams, even the ones that are basically non-conference games, but they're still between SWAC opponents. So we're gonna look at it like that. So I'm gonna go through the last 10 games, the record over the last 10 games, because it don't need to go back too much further than that. If there haven't been a lot of matchups in recent years, then yes, I'll go back to like no later than like the early 2000s. So there is one matchup that I had to go back further than that because that matchup hadn't happened that frequently. So let's go ahead and get into this. The Bulldogs, they play Alcorn. They're 3-7 over their last 10 games against Alcorn. They did win their last matchup, which Alcorn was in the East. Once the SWAC went to divisional format, then obviously when FAMU and Bethune-Cookman joined, they joined the West. So that put the Braves, out of that. Before 2021, these teams played every year, and so that's why they haven't played since. I believe the last actual matchup between these teams was in 2019. They were supposed to play in the spring of 2021, and that game was forfeited because Alcorn decided to opt out of the spring season. And that's actually technically Alabama A&M's last victory over Alcorn, but like I said, that's not even a paper matchup. So I mean, that's just a paper matchup and not an on field matchup. But um, they were awarded a 2-0 win in that game, and that's the last time these two teams um, were slated to play was in 2019. We in 2021. Their last actual on the field matchup, and this is the only one I'm kind of go. This is the only matchup I'm going to kind of go a little bit deeper in because obviously the last time they were supposed to play, they didn't play. The last time they had an actual on the field matchup was November 16th, 2019. Alcorn won that game 34-28. The Braves on the field have dominated this series. Uh, going back um, going back to 2013, Alabama A&M has basically one victory over the Braves. They're 1-5. They're 1-6 since 2013 against the Braves on the field. You have to go back to November 2nd, 2013 to find the Bulldogs' last on the field victory, and that was a 19-18 win in at Alcorn. So that changes a lot in this game. I mean, obviously, they do get technical credit for winning that game, even though that wasn't an on the field game. But like I said, you have to go back to 2013 for the last actual on the field Bulldog win, and 2019 for the last on the field actual matchup. So these teams haven't played in a long time, and it's great to see these two teams playing, even though it's not a conference game. They haven't played in so long, so it's almost worth taking that non-conference slot to play this game. Um, Bethune-Cookman against the Bulldogs, they're 3-1. The Bulldogs are 3-1 against Bethune-Cookman. They've only basically played since these two teams have been in the SWAC, and so that 3-1 record goes to 2021. They won their last matchup against the Wildcats, and their last win was this past season. On October 12th, 2024, they won that game 56-12, and that was actually the actual last matchup. Jackson State and Alabama A&M are tied at 5-5 over their last 10 games. Jackson State is on a 4-game winning streak in this matchup. Bulldogs last won a game against Jackson State on April 10th, 2021, 52-43. The last matchup between these two teams was October 5th of this past season. Tigers won 45-38. Alabama A&M is 8-2 against Valley. They're on a 2-game winning streak. Their last win was this past season on November 23rd. They won that game 49-35. The Magic City Classic, Alabama A&M, Alabama State is tied at 5 over the last 10 games. Bulldogs are on a 3-game losing streak. They last won their last win in this series was on October 30th, 2021, when they won a game 42-28. The last matchup in this game was a Alabama State victory, 27-19 this past season on October 26th. Bulldogs trail Grambling 4-6 in the last 10 games, although they are on a 3-game winning streak. They last won against Grambling this past season, which is also obviously their last matchup between these two teams, and they won that game on November 14th, 22-17. Prairie View and Alabama A&M is another matchup that hasn't been played in a long time. These two teams are actually meeting for the first time since 2016. So this is almost 10 years between matchups, and that's one of those things that happens when you have a bigger conference, and you have divisional matchups that don't get played. You have non-division opponents that don't get played that often, and so these two teams haven't really faced off in a long time. So this is a very fresh matchup. Like I said, you have to go back to 2016 to find the last time these two teams actually stepped on the field against each other. And that game in 2016 was a Prairie View win by a score of 41-30. The Bulldogs actually last beat Prairie View on September 15th, 2012, with a 42-30 victory. Prairie View leads the series 8-2. So that's kind of a surprise, but the bulk of this series, the bulk of this recent series took place when Prairie View was on their upswing. So They were able to pick up some wins there. Um, Bulldogs are on a 4 game losing streak in this series, so they have a couple losing streaks that they're on in matchups. Speaking of losing streaks, FAMU holds a 4 game to nothing edge over the Bulldogs. That dates back to 2021 when they joined the SWAC. So that puts the Bulldogs on a 4 game losing streak in that matchup. Um, their last matchup was this past season on November 29th. Rattlers won that game 28 to nothing. And then in another matchup between two teams that haven't played in a while, Texas Southern, Bulldogs are 8-2 in this matchup. They've won 5 games in a row over Texas Southern. The last time they played was in 2022. Um, which was a 24-20 Alabama A&M victory. So as you can see, the Bulldogs have, they have 4 big losing streaks in matchups. So they have opportunity to snap a couple of those streaks this season. And like I said, they're playing a few teams that they haven't played in a few years. So a lot of fresh matchups for the Bulldogs this upcoming season. Next up, we have Alabama State. Again, they have a few matchups that haven't been played too often. Their first game is against Southern. They're 3-7 in their last 10 games against the Jaguars. They did win their last matchup, which was on September 2nd, 2023. They won a game 14-10, and that was the last matchup between these two teams. Um, you kind of gotta go back a few years. Southern and Bama State have only played like 2 times since like the mid 2010s. So there's not a lot of matchups there. They played in the spring of 2021, and then they played obviously like I said in 2023 to kick off the to kick off their season. So this is a matchup that hasn't had a lot of run recently. So you got to kind of go back a little bit to find some matchups there. Um, FAMU leads the series against Bama State 5 games to nothing. Their last win, the last game in this matchup was on October 5th of this past season, 28-13 victory for the Rattlers. Hornets haven't defeated the Rattlers in this 5 game stretch. Again, another matchup that doesn't have a lot of games in it. Bethune-Cookman, Alabama State leads that series 4 games to 3. That goes back to 2003. Hornets are on a 4 game winning streak in this matchup, and they won this past season on September 28th, 26-21. Bama State leads Jackson State 6-4. They lost the last matchup. Their last victory over Jackson State was in 2023 with a 24-19 victory. And obviously, the last time these two teams played was November 16th of this past season. Jackson State won that game 16-10. Like I said, Match City Classic. Uh, that game is tied at 5. Hornets won the last matchup 27-19. This one was a very interesting one to me when I looked at it last season, and that's Prairie View. The Panthers were on a 9 game winning streak in this series before the Hornets picked up a victory. And so now they trail this season series right now over the last 10 games, 1 game to 9. They won the last matchup, which was this past season on November 23rd. They won that game 9-6. Prairie View, Texas Southern takes on Alabama State, again, a team they haven't played in a couple years. Last matchup between these two teams, Bama State won it on October 1st of 2022. They won the game 16-13. The Hornets lead the series 9 games to 1 with a 5 game winning streak. Also, they lead Valley 9 games to 1. They won 3 games in a row in this series, and the last time these teams played, the Hornets won 10-12 on October 12th of this past season, 54-17. Pine Bluff, another good series record for the Hornets, 8-2 over the last 10. Although they did lose their last matchup, which was in 2022, November 24th. They lost the game 19-16. The last time they beat the Golden Lions was on October 9th, 2021, when they won the game 35-15. Moving on to the Braves of Alcorn. Uh, Again, they're 7-3 against the Bulldogs of Alabama A&M. They are technically on a one game losing streak. Like I said before, their last victory was in 2019. Pine Bluff, Alcorn leads that series right now 6-4 with a 4 game winning streak. They last won this past season on October 5th with a 38-28 victory. Braves also lead Prairie View 7 games to 3 with a 1 game streak. They last won this past season, which was the last matchup. That game was on November 16th, 2024. They won the game 26-13. FAMU and Alcorn finally playing. That's been a matchup that a lot of people have been speaking on since these two teams, since the Rattlers joined. Everybody been waiting for this to kind of happen. We thought we might get that matchup in the SWAC championship game in 2023, but Prairie View ended up winning the division. So these two teams have not played since 1982. And the Rattlers won, and the Braves won that game in 1982 on October 30th by a score of 23-13. So this has been a matchup that's long been coming, and these are the only two. This is the only team that either one of the new teams hasn't played since they've joined. So this is a very, very fresh matchup. It don't really get much fresher than that. Braves lead Valley with a 10 game winning streak. They're 10-0 over their last 10 games. Their last one, the last win was in the last matchup last season, November 9th. September 28th, 2024. They won a game 42-21. They lead Texas Southern 7 games to 3. They won the last matchup, November 9th, 2024. November 9th, 2024, 42-21 was that victory. They lead Southern 6 games to 4. They lost the last matchup. Their last win was in 2023 on November 4th. They won a game 44-21. They lost this past season to Southern 24-14 on October 19th. They trailed Grambling 4 games to 6 with a 2 game winning streak. Their last win was this past season on October 12th, 2024, 17-15. And they tied with Jackson State 5-5. They lost the last matchup on November 23rd of this past season, 48-10. Their last win in this matchup was on November 18th of 2023. They won a game 28-24. Wildcats being the first new team in the conference, they're gonna have a lot of their series don't go back as far. So you're gonna have a lot of small sample sizes. Like I said, they trail the Bulldogs, Alabama, and them 1 game to 3. Their last win in this matchup was on November 11th of 2023. They won a game 31-14. They're 3-4 against Bama State. Since going back to 2003, they're on a 4 game losing streak in this matchup. Their last win was in 2012, September 2nd. They won a game 38-28. Since they've been in the SWAC, they're 0-2 against Southern since they've been in the SWAC. If you go back to 2005, they're 0-3. Other than that, their matchups was like in the 98 Heritage Bowl, and then a couple of matchups in the 80s. They're 0-3 against Southern right now. The last game played between these teams was last season on November 9th, which was a 25-23 5 overtime win for Southern. They're 2-0 against Pine Bluff since 2004. These teams haven't played since the Wildcats joined the SWAC, so this is their first SWAC matchup. This is again a fresh matchup. They're 2-0 in this series since 2004. The last time these two teams played was on September 10th of 2005, which was a 31-17 Wildcat victory. They're 5-1 against Valley going back to 2018. Wildcats are on a 3 game winning streak here. Their last win came in the last matchup last season on October 19th with a 20-10 victory there. Wildcats are 5-2 against Grambling since 2004. They won the last matchup, which was on November 2nd of this past season, 24-21. They're 1-4 against Jackson State since 2019, and their last win was in 2019. Their last win was in 2019 on September 1st in the MEAC SWAC Challenge. They won that game 36-15. The last matchup between these two teams was last season on October 26th. The Tigers won that game 37-17 over the Wildcats, and of course the Florida Classic. Bethune leads this matchup 6 games to 4. They're on a 4 game losing streak. Their last win came in 2019, 31-27, and the last time these teams faced off was last season which was a 41-38 Rattler victory on November 23rd of 2024. Speaking of the Rattlers, like I said, they're 5-0 against Bama State. They won last season. They're 4-0. They're 4-1 against Valley. Their last win was on September 30th of 2023, 31-7. And of course, they lost that game on November 16th to Valley, as we all know, 24-21. As I said before, they're 0-1 against Alcorn since 1982. So that's a very fresh matchup. They're 7-3 against Southern. In the last 10 games, they're on a 5-game winning streak, and the last win was this past season, 24-6 on October 26th. They're 1-5 against Jackson State since 2013. Their last win came on September 3rd of 2023, 28-10, and they lost this past season to Jackson State on October 19th, 35-21. They're 2-0 against Pine Bluff since joining the SWAC. They played in 21 and 22. Their last game and last victory against the Golden Lions was on October 29th of 2022. They won that game 27-6. 4-0 against the Bulldogs, Alabama, and them. Last one this past season, 28-20. And then, like I said, they're 4-6 against Bethune-Cookman. They are on a 4-game winning streak. So that's great for the Rattlers, and they won their last matchup in that series. Grambling. Grambling is 4-6 against Prairie View in the State Fair Classic. They're on a 1-game slide right now. Their last victory was in September 30th of 2023. They won that game 35-20. Last season, they lost to Prairie View 36, 34, and 5 overtimes on September 28th. They're 8-2 against Texas Southern. They did lose the last matchup this past season on October 26th, 24-17. They beat the Tigers Texas Southern 35-23 on September 23rd of 2023. They're also 8-2 against Pine Bluff on a 3-game winning streak. They last won the matchup this past season on October 19th, 31-21. They're 7-3 against Jackson State. I think this is the first SWAC matchup between the two teams in a few years. They're on a one game streak, I guess you could say. They won this past season on September 21st, 41-20. They lead the Bulldogs 6-4, but they are on a 3-game losing streak. The last time they did beat the Bulldogs was on October 2nd of 2021, 37-28. Noah Barton was the starting quarterback for Grambling in that game as he beat Akil Glass and Alabama A&M in a really entertaining game, honestly. 37-28. And of course, they lost this past season to the Bulldogs 22-17. They're 2-5 against Bethune-Cookman since 2004. The last time they beat Bethune-Cookman was in 2023 on October 28th, 28-14, and they lost this past season 24-21. They lead Alcorn 6-4, 2-game losing streak. The last time they beat Alcorn was in 2022 by a score of 35-6 on October 29th. And then they lost this past season. They're 4-6 in the Bayou Classic against Southern. They're on a 3-game losing streak there. The last time they did beat Southern was on November 27th of 2021 on a game-winning field goal with basically no time left. They won that game 29-26, and they lost this past season to Southern on November 30th, 2024, with a 24-14 loss there. Jackson State leads Southern 6-4. They're on a 6-game winning streak right now. These two teams have played twice in the last couple seasons in the SWAC championship game and regular season. So that's 4 wins right there between these two teams. And then you throw in a couple other wins there. Their last game against Southern was their last game with Southern was a 41-13 victory in the SWAC championship game on December 7th of this past season. Of course, like I said, they tied with the Bulldogs, Alabama, and them 5-5. The last time they beat them was this past season. Bama State 4-6. Their last victory over Bama State was this past season, 16-10. Grambling 3-7. Last win was in 2023, 66-22. On November, that was the last victory over Grambling, and then obviously they 5-1 against FAMU. Last victory this past season. 10-0 against Valley. Their last win was this past season on November 9th with a 51-14 victory there. 4-1 against Bethune-Cookman on a 4-game winning streak. They beat them this past season 37-17. And 5-5 against Alcorn. Their last victory was this past season 48-10. Valley is 1-9 against Southern. I'm slipping with these slides. Valley is 1-9 against Southern. They're on a 6-game losing streak. The last time they beat Southern was in 2012 on September 13th, 6-0. The last time these two teams played was on November 12th, 2022. Southern won that game 27-7. They're 4-5 against Texas Southern. Uh, they won their last matchup between these two teams on October 26th, 2019. So they haven't played in quite a while. They won that game 35-14. So this is another matchup that hasn't happened in a while. So we're getting a few of those this upcoming season where we're getting a few teams that haven't had a lot of recent history with each other. And Valley does have the last win in this series so far. They're 1-4 against FAMU since 2013. They have a 1-game streak against FAMU on the winning side, which was the two teams played. They won 24-21. They're 2-8 against Alabama A&M. Their last win came on November 3rd of 2022. They won that game 30-20. They lost this past season 49-35. And like I said, they're 0-10 against Alcorn. Last game against Alcorn was this past season. They lost 42-21. They're 1-5 against Bethune-Cookman on a 3-game slide. Their last win against Bethune-Cookman was on October 9th, 2021. They won again 20-14. They lost this past season 20-10. 0-10 against Jackson State. Last game was this past season. Lost that 51-14. They're 1-9 against Bama State on a 3-game slide. The last time they did beat Bama State was in 2021 on November 13th. They won that game 44-31. And they're 2-6 against Prairie View, and they've lost their last 2 games in this series, including last season on November 2nd, 17-16. They beat the Panthers on November 19th of 2022, 27-7, to basically keep the Panthers out of the SWAC championship game that year. That was a crazy Saturday. TSU and Prairie View both had an opportunity to win the West that day, and they both lost in surprising fashion. Speaking of the Panthers, they are 9-1 against Texas Southern in the Labor Day Classic. Their last victory over Texas Southern was in 2023, 37-34 in overtime. They lost that matchup this past season on August 31st, 27-9. They're 6-4 in the State Fair Classic against Grambling. They won the last matchup 36-34 in 5 overtimes, which was on September 28th of this past season. They're 3-7 against Alcorn. They lost their last matchup 26-13 last year. They did beat the Braves 23-20 on September 23rd of 2023. They're 3-7 against Southern with their last win coming on November 11th of 2023. They won that game 27-21. Southern won the matchup last season 31-24 in overtime on September 21st of 2024. They're 9-1 against Bama State. The last time they beat the Hornets was on November 18th, 2021, 2023, excuse me. They won again 21-14. They lost 9-6 this past season. 8-2 against Alabama A&M. They're on a 4-game winning streak. The last time they beat the Bulldogs was on September 17th, 2026. Excuse me, September 6th, September 17th, 2016. They won that game 41-20. They're 8-2 against Pine Bluff. The last time they beat Pine Bluff was in 2023. They won that game 38-14. Golden Lions won the last matchup last season on a Friday night on October 11th. They won that game. The Panthers lost that game 21-17. And of course, they're 6-2 against Valley on a 2-game winning streak. And they won the last matchup between these two teams last season 17-16. Moving on to Southern. The Jaguars are 9-1 against Valley. They're on a 6-game winning streak. Last time they played Valley was in 2022. On November 12th, they won that game 27-7. They're 7-3 against Bama State. They lost the last match between these two teams, 14-10. on September 2nd of 2023. Last time they beat Bama State was in the spring of 2021 on February 26th, which was actually the first game of the spring season for these two teams. They won that game 24-21. Both of those games were in Montgomery. This will be Bama State's first trip to Baton Rouge since 2016. So that's a matchup that hasn't really happened that often. And so even though it's a non-conference game, it's still, a matchup that hadn't been played that frequently. Southern 4-6 against Jackson State on a 6-game losing streak. The last time they beat Jackson State again was in the spring of 2021, 34-14, and they lost twice to Jackson State this past season, including on December 7th in the SWAC championship game. They lost the game 41-13. They're 3-0 against Bethune-Cookman since 2005. Their last victory was that 5 overtime game this past season, 25-23. They're 3-7 against FAMU. They're on a 5-game losing streak. The last time they beat the Rattlers was on September 29th of 2012. Jaguars won that game 21-14, and they lost this past season 24-6. They're 9-1 against Pine Bluff. They won 4 games in a row in this series. The last time they won was the last time they played, which was this past season on November 16th. Jaguars won that game 31-9. They're 4-6 against Alcorn. They won the last matchup between these two teams this past season on October 19th. They won again 24-14. Southern 8-2 against Texas Southern on a 2-game winning streak. Last matchup and last win for Southern was this past season on October 12th. They won that game 22-19. And they're not the 6-4 against Grambling in the Bayou Classic on a 3-game winning streak. Their last win and last matchup was this past season on November 30th. They won that game 24-14. Moving on to Texas Southern, the Tigers snapped the 9-game losing streak to Prairie View last season with a 27-9 victory, giving them their first win in quite some time in this matchup. And that game was on August 31st of this past season. They're 5-4 against Valley. They did lose the last matchup between these two teams. The last time they beat Valley was in 2018. They won that game by a score of 42-14. And the last time the two teams played was in 2019. Valley won that game 35-14. They're 6-4 against Pine Bluff. They won the last matchup 31-23, which came last season on November 23rd. They're 2-8 against Grambling. They beat Grambling last season, which was the last matchup and the last victory for the Tigers of Texas Southern. On October 26th, they won the game 24-17. 3-7 against Alcorn. They did have a 2-game winning streak against Alcorn before last season, but the Braves won that game 42-21. And the last time TSU beat Alcorn was on November 12th of 2023. They won the game 44-10. 1-9 against Bama State. They're on a 5-game losing streak. These teams haven't really played that often. The last time these two teams played was in 2022. 16-13 victory for the Hornets. Before that, the last time Texas Southern beat Bama State was on September 26th of 2016. They won that game 31-27. They're 2-8 against Southern. The last time they beat Southern was in 2022 on September 17th. They beat them 24-0. And they lost last season to Southern 22-19 in overtime. And they're 2-8 against Alabama A&M. Their last win came in 2016 on October 1st. They won that game 34-31. The last time these two teams played was in 2022. They lost that game 24-20 on November 19th. And finally, Pine Bluff, the Golden Lions, wrapped this up by having a 4-6 record against Alcorn. The last time they beat Alcorn was in 2016. On September 15th, they won again 45-43. They lost last season 38-28, and they are on a 4-game losing streak to Alcorn. Against Texas Southern, they lost the last matchup last season on November 23rd, 31-23. They beat the Tigers on November 18th of 2023, 35-34. That was the last time the Golden Lions beat Texas Southern. They're 2-8 against Grambling on a 3-game slide. The last time they beat Grambling was on November 6th of 2021. They won that game 33-26, and they lost last season to Grambling 31-21. They're 0-2 against Bethune-Cookman, so no victories there. This will be the first matchup for these two teams since 2005. which was a 31-17 loss for the Golden Lions. They're 1-9 against Southern. They're on a 4-game slide in this matchup. Um, the last time they beat Southern was in the spring of 2021 on March 6th. They won that game 33-30, and they lost to Southern last season 31-9. They're 0-2 against FAMU since FAMU joined the SWAC. So obviously looking for their first victory there, and they lost the last time these two teams played in 2022, 27-6. They're 2-8 against Prairie View. They did win the last matchup this past season, 21-17, and they're 2-8 against Bama State. The last time these two teams played, the Golden Lions won that game on November 24th of 2022. They won that game 19-16. So as you can see, there's a lot of matchups that are taking place this season that hadn't been played in a long time. So this is a season of fresh matchups, so that leads to some intrigue. There's some teams that haven't played in a long time that had played a lot before that, and then there's some teams that hadn't played in a long time that hadn't really played that much before that either. So there's a lot of variety on this schedule. And there's a lot of solid streaks. I think the longest winning streak I've seen on this list, besides Alcorn and Jackson State being 10-0 over Valley, I think Jackson State has a 6-game winning streak over Southern. FAMU has a 5-game winning streak over Southern. Those are a couple of the longest streaks that we have on this list. Also, Alcorn has a 4-game winning streak over Pine Bluff as well. So there are some solid winning streaks there. There's no real surprising winning streaks on this list like we had last season with Prairie View over Bama State. But we'll see how these change. Can some of these teams add to these streaks? Can some teams snap streaks? We'll see. With that being said, man, I'm your tour guide around the SWAC. C. Well signing out, and I will catch y'all on the rebound. Peace.